Hey Neil, thank you for joining me today. I'm joined with Neil from OCT, who is the founder and chairman over there. How are you doing today?
Very well, Yoni. It's as always a pleasure to be speaking to you, and thank you for making the time today.
Of course. Thank you. So, before we kind of get into OCT or Oxford Cannabinoid Technologies, would love to maybe just get the quick rundown on kind of your background and where you're coming from to kind of start this business.
Sure. So I majored in biology at Oxford, which was the one of the sort of key parts to how OCT came together. But before founding OCT, I worked in investment banking and then in a family office doing venture capital and private equity for them. And then set up my own little investment firm called Kingsley Capital Partners, and it was through Kingsley, where I'm a partner, one of the partners, that we set up OCT. And it's been we set the business up about in 2017, in March 2017, and it's already been quite a roller coaster of a journey.
Indeed. So maybe the kind of the elephant in the room, like what is OCT and kind of like what are you guys trying to accomplish over there?
Well, so OCT at its heart is a biotechnology and drug development firm that works in the substrate of cannabis to develop a series of drug compounds. I think one of the ways to think about it is it's sort of almost classic biotech and pharma that happens to work in cannabis as opposed to a sort of traditional quote unquote cannabis company. And the genesis of the company was really driven by a couple of things. So the first, as I mentioned before, was the lucky coincidence that I read biology at Oxford for my undergraduate degree. But the second was the onset of the cannabis market, and I think the gap in the market for genuine research and genuine drug development in cannabis. I think there's a lot of businesses that are in the business of growing and selling cannabis, and that's more than fine. You can be incredibly successful doing that, and there's a whole load of very ancillary businesses and as part of the ecosystem that you will know at Casa Verde far better than I will. But at the time that we set up OCT, there was, GW Pharma aside, a great big gap in the market for quality research and approaching the medical potential of cannabis from a more clinical pharmaceutical route. And that really is what OCT is.
Fantastic. And, obviously, as part of OCT in the name of the company is Oxford. Can you tell us a little about kind of like what's the nature of the relationship with Oxford? And, beyond that, are you working with other universities, be it in the UK or abroad?
Yes. So the nature of the relationship with Oxford was really born out of about 16, 17 months of discussions with the university before we even set up the business. And it started by me going to see my old biology professor and asking him if Oxford would be interested in exploring some of the medical potential of cannabis. And from there, that led to a series of conversations with the medical sciences department and a series of PIs, of researchers, looking into who all proposed projects to further look into the medical potential of cannabinoids. As that discussion was ongoing, we started drawing up a research umbrella agreement with the university. Oxford works exclusively with us on cannabis research. And that in and of itself took quite some time to negotiate, which is, was both quite frustrating at the time, but if you look back at it now, is quite an interesting barrier to entry for others, who might be trying to sort of do similar activities. So that was how it started with Oxford, and I'll go into some of the studies that we're doing with them in a sec. But to answer your other question, Yoni, yes, we do work with other universities. So there's some studies with Roehampton going on at the moment. There's There's a few that you will know about at Casa Verde, but that we can't actually announce yet, that are very exciting with both, Ivy Leagues in your country and then much further afield, exploring a wide array of indications, but our focus really remains on pain, which as I think we both know is a massive market, and is also a market where the research, or certainly the anecdotal data, is accumulating fast, that cannabis can have a positive effect on alleviating all types of pain.
And so, I think a lot of, investors might not understand fully kind of how the business model works on like the traditional biotech side. So, kind of just high level, can you kind of just explain like the respective processes and steps of what this kind of looks like and how you can potentially monetize these findings along the way?
I think the key is actually, before research begins, to generate your own IP, before which you then send to your research partners to test out through various assays. And so, put another way, it's very difficult when a pharma and drug development is so based on patents and protecting compounds before you can take them through clinical trials. It's very difficult, well, in fact, if not impossible, to patent a natural compound. So cannabis and cannabinoids are natural products, and therefore difficult to patent. So without going into sort of too much detail in this very public forum, but the detail of which you actually know, we do some funky stuff upstream to cannabinoids that allow us to put various types of regulatory protection around them. And once we've done that, we then send them to our research partners, the biggest of which is Oxford, to test out across various different types of screens and assays. If anything resonates, and some things do, then those particular compounds that we've already adapted in different ways, because we've adapted them, it means you can protect them. And those become the precursor drug candidates. After that, it is your classic kind of pharma route. You will do another year, if not more, of preclinical development, ensuring that you can find reliable ways of manufacturing the compound according to the highest standards on a larger scale. And once you've refined all of those with CROs and other partners, you will then look to start clinical trials, which are phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, etc. And the interesting thing about that is, versus other ways of selling cannabis in the market, the pharmaceutical route, once you've gone through trials, is so regulated and so protected that you then have, once you pass phase 3, you then have up to 2 decades of protection around a drug for a particular indication. And we're not the first to do it, to be honest. GW Pharmaceuticals, which is one of the leading lights in the space, has done incredibly well pursuing that route. But at the same time, aside from them, I'm not really sure that there's that many other kind of biotech and pharmaceutical focused cannabis companies that are sort of taking this route.
Understood. And when you mentioned kind of saying like doing some funky stuff, like is it fair to say like another way of like you guys are effectively creating unique cannabinoid compounds?
Well, they are based on not necessarily the major cannabinoids, but in some cases the minor cannabinoids. So we do take a range of cannabinoids and we do then make alterations to them. So I suppose in that way they are unique. Are they a novel cannabinoid that we've developed? Not necessarily, but they are a variation of kind of existing cannabinoids, both major and equally importantly minor cannabinoids.
And so in that respect, you mentioned earlier kind of having some success on the pain indication. Are you guys looking or focusing on other indications beyond pain? And as it relates to kind of some of these funky cannabinoids that you've created or altered, shall we say, have you started to kind of see any kind of traction against some of these indications?
Well, we are, and before I move to sort of those indications, it's probably worth spending some time on, pain, which is a massive market, and actually there's a myriad of sub indications within pain, and so it's some of those niche indications we are actively developing compounds for, such as CRPS, chronic regional pain syndrome. We have our lead compound is being developed for that indication. And so the answer to sort of the pain and pain variants is absolutely, but beyond that, we are looking at other indications, particularly cancer. It's worth stressing that our focus is still remains on pain and all of those indications, but about 10% of our activity and research budgets is then spent on other indications such as cancer and all of those types of things. And the truth is that there must be something there. I think we've all come across the anecdotal stories, and in some cases we've met these people who were stage 3 or stage 4 cancer, and they treated themselves, they self-medicated with cannabis, which at the time, it's probably changed now, at the time was procured illegally, was extracted illegally, and all of those types of things. And in some cases, the cancer just completely disappeared. And I think, some of the things that we're trying to do is establish why that works in some people, and some others who have had cancer, the same type of cancer, same type of cannabis, well, it doesn't work. And so there's a whole load of research that needs to be done and remains to be done. But I just think the prize, which is finding a natural yet effective way of hopefully treating different types of cancers and other indications is absolutely worth focusing on.
So fascinating. And so along this kind of the research work that you guys are doing, have you had any kind of papers published speaking about kind of the work that you guys are doing on any of these indications?
So our first one has been published by one of our lead researchers, Professor Zam Kader, who is a pain specialist at the University of Oxford. He has published his paper in the leading pain scientific journal, which is called Pain, and it effectively confirms that there are pathways that cannabinoids can act on nerve cells, on pain, that stimulate different types of gene and protein expression. And so it's a very interesting paper that, if I'm honest, it doesn't specifically lead to a drug compound, but what it does is validate everything that we've been doing so far in terms of the research, and shows that we are, as are others, we are hopefully onto something.
Absolutely. It's very exciting. Shifting gears for a second here, obviously Casa Verde is a large investor into Oxford Cannabinoid, and alongside us, you guys brought in Imperial Brands, which is one of the largest tobacco players in the world. Would love to kind of get some insight around kind of that experience in that process, but now kind of beyond, and just kind of color of, what's that look like, but also, what's your thinking or kind of alignment there of, not necessarily the most traditional investor, but certainly some potential strategic elements.
Absolutely. I should say at the outset that like you, Imperial are a pleasure to work with. They're incredibly professional, and incredibly responsive to sort of any requests or any discussions that we have with them. I think you'd have to ask them specifically as to what their rationale is, or was for investing in us. I'd imagine it was to just widen their knowledge base of what cannabis and cannabinoids can do in the future. I don't think they would deny the fact that investing in us is a long-term play, as most biotech companies are. But they, ever since they invested with us and with you in 2018, the process before that required, the usual due diligence, and because they're a listed FTSE 100 company, one of the largest tobacco companies in the world, the diligence and the quality of the of the materials and all of these things, and reporting has had to be to a very, very high standard, both before the transaction and certainly post investment. So it's interesting taking on an investor such as that. I know many people often might struggle with the presence of sort of tobacco getting involved. My experience, if I'm honest, has been completely the opposite. I personally think that any money that's not spent developing cigarettes and is spent on research and potential for good is a good thing. But beyond that, they have been incredibly professional to work with. And I hope the partnership continues. Would it lead to something strategic in the future? Perhaps. Who knows? If we uncover a compound that shows a particular affinity to do X, Y, and Z, and that ties in with what they're looking to do with their next generation products or something like that, then we'd love to have that conversation with them in due course. But it's right now it's early days, but they've been as you have, just incredibly supportive and lovely shareholders.
Thank you, Neil. Always a pleasure. Really appreciate it. So, I guess taking a step back, it seems like there's, a ton of progress. You guys are working on a number of indications. There's research projects both in the UK and abroad, or partnerships kind of getting lined up. Like, what lies ahead for the kind of future, the near-term future of OCT?
So we're considering our next fundraise and how that should be completed. Would it be another private raise, or would it be something that's more public markets focused? Let's see. So that's one thing that we're looking to do. Beyond that, I think we'd like to, with pain remaining our core focus, I think we'd like to expand our research network so we can start to look at a few other indications. I think it is a privilege working with Oxford, but there's a huge number of interesting universities and very capable scientists at universities across the world that I think would love to explore the medical potential of cannabis. And what's quite interesting and what we found is that there's often a bit of a mismatch between the administration of a university, who are often a little cautious about looking into sort of cannabis and its potential, and then there's the actual researchers, the leading scientists that do the work, who are less cautious, and sort of, this could be really interesting, let's look at X, Y, and Z, and talking to them is an absolute pleasure. And so I think we'd like to expand our research net. We'd like to look at different indications, and at some stage we'd like to consider, we're very sort of molecular and compound based, we'd like to consider other compounds in cannabis beyond cannabinoids, all of the terpenes, the flavonoids, all of those types of things. The entourage effect is something that's just not been explored enough, and absolutely should be, I think.
Fantastic. Well, Neil, really appreciate you taking the time here to kind of walk us through OCT, the vision, the execution. I think you're certainly one of the most unique portfolio companies that we have at Casa Verde, and sincerely appreciate you taking the time here. So until next time, my friend.
Yoni, as always, a pleasure, and speak soon.